I'm going to start recording. All right, guys. Welcome to the Women in White Coats live or / podcast episode. We are today, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Errin Weisman. Let me just briefly introduce myself. My name is Archana Shrestha, Dr. Archana Shrestha. I am one of the co-editors-in-chief of the Women in White Coats blog. I'm one of the co-authors of the Chronicles of Women in White Coats. And I am very lucky to be connecting today with Dr. Errin Weisman, and she is here on our show today. And she is a family medicine doctor and also does a lot of other things as well, including telehealth, emergency medicine. She does physician wellness and has a coaching and consulting business called Truth Prescriptions, and a podcast as well called Dr. Me First. And she wrote for our blog a really great article called How Burnout Affects Home Life and More. And I really thought it was a great article because a couple of things that really jumped out at me that you talked about, Errin, was about mom guilt and setting up doctor boundaries. So first of all, welcome to our show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to get in front of your audience, and I'm not going to lie at all. I am a true Facebook stalker of you. I love everything that you're doing. When the book came out, I was ready to pee my pants. I just think what you guys are doing is phenomenal, and to be a guest and to be a part of the blog is such an honor of mine.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a great journey. Just this whole thing starting with a book and just kind of growing from there. And with the blog, we really wanted to make it more of like a interactive kind of thing where we could constantly be putting up new content because there's so much to talk about, for us as women in white coats, so many different issues. And even since September when we launched our blog, there's so many different things that have come up as like current events and new, things happening in the news, like everything from gender pay disparity to Me Too in medicine and intimate partner violence. There's just so many really important topics that need to be addressed. So thank you so much for supporting us and for, contributing and spreading the word and being a part of our community. We really want to be, I know for you, a lot of what you do is really empowering women, especially other doctors in medicine, right?
I think that it's become my second calling. I feel like medicine was definitely my first calling in life. And I feel like now what I'm doing in the world of physician wellness and taking care of my colleagues is now my second calling. So I call myself a doctor to doctors because 4 years ago, I was in the hellish pit of burnout. It was awful. It was deep. It was dark. It was lonely. And I promised myself if I figured out a way out of it, that I was going to tell anyone and everyone who would listen that this does not have to be what defines us. This does not have to be our life, that no other female physician would ever struggle with this alone, and that I would give as much help as I possibly could. Because at the point there, I had finished residency. I was jumping into private practice, outpatient family medicine, and I was probably burned out in residency, but because the status quo of healthcare is so fucking toxic that I didn't even know. I did not even know. So many times we thought, it's just going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. Put your head down. Keep going. It's going to get better. And it was not getting better. And I am not a quiet person. I am a squeaky wheel. So you better believe I called up my administration. I was like, something needs to change, and I worked for a pretty big employed health organization. And it just wasn't working. And you know what? I was to the point that I was ready to throw my stethoscope across the room, like do a burnout in the parking lot and go work at Kmart. Because I was done. I was so unhappy. I felt empty. I was broken. I was literally fractured in my soul that I did what we tell our patients not to do. I got on the internet and oh my God, I found so many other physicians who felt like I did. Mm-hmm. I knew I had went to my office manager and I was telling her and she's like, well, you have small children, it's a new practice, like patting my head and then like telling me to go back and see patients. She even made the remark one time that I needed to start like some Zoloft. And I knew in my soul, I'm like, no, this is not, I don't need a psychiatric evaluation. I don't need an inpatient stay. Like something has to give.
Yeah.
And that's when I found a life coach and I started working with her. And all the stuff that we should have learned in med school about like recognizing our why, how to set up good boundaries, what real self-care is, not just sitting around and doing yoga 3 times a week, what real true self-care is. It changed my world. And so I love my life coach, but she wasn't in my age demographic. She wasn't practicing. And I was like, you know what? I need to go get training in this because I know that I have friends, I have medical student colleagues, I have so many others. They need this. They 100% need this. And I got my own special sauce that I could layer on top of it. And so I went and got life coach training. I started back in 2015. And at first, I'll be perfectly honest, I had definite imposter syndrome. I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I talk to others? But you know, after doing it and working with our other colleagues and like seeing the things that they're doing, I'm like, hot damn, I'm a life coach and a doctor too. And so I really put that out there to people is that your first calling's medicine, but that's not your only calling. What are you moving to next? And it has just been such an amazing journey. So I mention this all the time. I am the only female physician in my county here in southern rural Indiana. The other guys are middle-aged white dudes who's got no clue. You know, no clue on anything that what we are dealing with. I mean, I brought up the gender pay issues and I thought that I was going to like have laser beams stared down at me because they had no idea.
Right.
And so I started my podcast in order to build that community. So it's called Dr. Me First. And it's where we just have authentic conversations. And I make my guests, their only homework is they have to pick one word that our conversation rolls around. Oh my gosh, I have had some amazing conversations. I've only launched 10 episodes, so I drop them Netflix style. So like 5, 7, 10 at a time, so you can totally like binge on them and wait for the next set. So I've got about 35 episodes to drop. So I'm trying to be patient, but I want to drop them all the time. But the whole point of the podcast, one, it's like I said, it's selfish because I want to talk to other female physicians. And two, I want all of my colleagues out there to know that what you are struggling with, I bet there's thousands of us.
There, it has become so common. I mean, I just hear it over and over again. And we tend to get a lot of blog submissions on our blog about burnout, and everyone has their different story around it and how they came out from it. And I really liked yours because you shared some really practical tips just about, the mom guilt and how to deal with mom guilt. Because I think like for me as like that was once I was fine up until I became a mom, like dealing with a crazy schedule. I could manage everything. But then once I was like, wow, my job is taking me away from my kids so much, like especially on evenings and night shifts because I'm an emergency physician and I work a lot of those odd hours. And it's like, wow, it's really taking me away from them. And then you just kind of have this guilt of like, well, I spent all this time training to become a doctor. And I do enjoy it. It's not that I don't enjoy it, but then at the same time, I want to be with my family. And how do you kind of balance that, so you don't have so much mom guilt? So yeah, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I think it all goes back to becoming a mother. It is a topic that is not discussed as a woman in healthcare, as a female physician. It's just like, oh, it's just another thing on the list. Like you're pregnant and then you take a few weeks off and then it's like back to practice as normal. That is absolutely not the reality of it. I mean, and you can attest to that. It's like your whole world gets shook up after that baby pops out of you. And I didn't have the recognition or even the mentorship to understand that tidal wave that was coming. So I am really empowered talking to my pregnant and postpartum colleagues about like, hey, I know you're an alpha female. I know you take names and you kick ass, but motherhood, it is going to rock your world in ways that you had never even expected. Because my first baby, I had him October of my intern year. I took 4.5 weeks off. I was back in my intern year again. And you know, I did not process through all of that until I was in burnout, until I started to realize that I wasn't a failure if I wanted to be a mother and a doctor too, that I wasn't a failure if I adjusted my schedule and I didn't work a full FTE because of my family, and that I wasn't a failure to admit that my life goals had changed. That was huge for me. And I
Yeah.
coach a lot of women physicians around that, because up until that point, we have done everything. We just push through and go a little bit further into it. And like I said, motherhood, it changes things.
Sorry, I'm so
No
sorry.
worries.
All right.
And that mom guilt, I think, is even more intense as a female physician. Hey, girl, we just roll with it. We're moms. It's fine.
Yeah. Well,
Seriously, because there's so much more for us to process, both personally and professionally, because we work at such a high level. That is our expectation for motherhood too. And so many of us feel like, or I would characterize, I felt like it was just supposed to seem in. It was like yet another thing, you kind of added in, when in reality, you now have to take your world and put it all around your motherhood.
yeah, I mean, I think that's such a key point, is just like recognizing like, hey, you know what? My life situation has changed, and how I want to, how much time off I want has changed. And it's kind of like, in medicine, it's kind of like you're just supposed to like power through everything, like do everything on no sleep, no food, not go into the bathroom, just like as if
Yep.
you're like superhuman, and just like, it's just ingrained in us, like in the training from med school to residency, to just like tough it out, don't complain, just keep your nose down, keep your head down and just keep pushing through
One
no
more.
matter
Go
what.
see one more. Yeah, keep
Right.
going.
Right. But then at the same time, you're just like, well, no, you know what? This doesn't feel right. My life situation has changed. Now I have kids and they want to be with me, and I don't even have time to be with them. And sometimes we're just like, feel like we shouldn't have that. But so I actually grew up with a mother who's a family doctor, and, so I saw her in medicine, and she was always trying to juggle it all. So, I mean, I had that perspective, but at the same time, there was still that mommy guilt. And so what really helped me was just being like, well, you know what, I have a daughter. So I feel like, well, you know what, I'm showing her that she can have it, like she can have a career too and be a mother. And there's ways of adjusting things, because I did actually go down on my hours once I had my second child. And that made such a world of difference.
It does. And I think that that's where it goes back to when I really question in the gals that I work with, where is your worth determined? What determines your worth? And, so many times, when people are like, well, what do you do? Or, well, I'm a physician, I'm a doctor. You know what I mean? Instead of describing where our worth is, we put it in the things we do, instead
Mm-hmm.
of from a more like authentic and real place in what we are. Like, I am creative, I am an athlete, or you know what I mean, I am athletic. And when you can start shifting from using that mindset of you are what you do, because it's kind of like in primary care, you eat what you kill on an RVU schedule. But when we can start thinking about our own selves in that quality model, like what do we bring to this world, that's when you can start having a shift in like dealing with that. Because if you're having mommy guilt, don't push it away. If you're having jealousy when you're scanning down through your Facebook feed and you're like, oh my God, she went on vacation again, I really encourage people to like lean into that and be like, what is your inner self telling you when you're like, you see that and it triggers you? Because that reaction, there's something behind it. But too many times as physicians, we just swallow it back and we just like burrow through. We just move on. And I am all about like processing that, because that reaction is real and there's something behind it. And when it goes back to the mom guilt thing, I think the hardest thing for me, I remember telling my husband, I'm like, where is the freaking textbook for this? I need it, right? But, and so many times, that's what we rely on, and it's almost becomes a crutch. And so what we need to realize, there is no textbook. The hashtag you're doing fine, like, is your kid fed? Do they have their essential needs met? They do. Okay, great. Are you doing those same things for yourself? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's where we have to kind of adjust our mindset with it. And that's why I love the coaching aspect so much, because it has really just shifted from my type A recovering perfectionist to realize that it's not black and white and there's a lot of gray, and you just got to get in there and play with it.
Yeah, totally. And I think, there's different seasons in life and you just have to give yourself some grace, and just be like, well, like for this year, for example, like we're so busy with the blog and we're planning a conference. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do Christmas cards and like do the picture and like do this and do that and get everyone's mailing address. I'm just like going to not do that this year. And it's okay, I'm just going to like take that off my list of stuff to do. And, so it's just like little things like that, or like even for Christmas this year, I'm like, let's just keep it really low key, like not do anything extravagant, or like buy like so many presents and like all these gifts for all these people. I'm like, you know what? Let's just keep it low key. And so I think like sometimes you just have to be like, this is a season of my life where other things are really busy and taking priority, and I just need to like not worry about other things. Like this summer, I also didn't plant any flowers because I was like, I'm just not going to do that this
No
year.
time for landscaping. Mm-mm. Well,
Yeah.
and don't you, and the thing is that I remind you with that too, is that it's not gone forever. You want to start
Yeah.
gardening again? You can get it. But for right now, in this time, what is best for this season is so important. And I talked about that in the blog about boundaries. So I'm
Yeah.
a good farm girl. I've built a lot of fences in my life. And I was thinking about that when I was doing some boundaries work. And it's not just about like keeping stuff out. Boundaries are so important for keeping your livestock in, keeping the things that
Yeah.
you want in your life close to you. And I think
Hmm.
too many times we think about boundaries like we have to say no. I don't have time for this, or I can't add another thing into my plate, when really you need to think about boundaries and being like, okay, so what is it that I want in my boundaries? What do I want in here? What do I want to keep in here? And that way, when you say no, it's because you're like, hey, this is my herd. This is what I'm taking care of. This
Hmm.
is what I've got right now in this season, and it's not a no forever, but it's for right now. It's like, hey, no. And I also encourage people to say, don't say that you don't have time for it. Say, this is not a priority right now. And that feels a lot more true to people, because you know what? Time is a huge asset that we are losing every second. And so it's one of those that you get panicked with that. But when you say it's not a priority, you're like, oh, yeah, it's not. Or if you say, oh, it's not a priority, wait a minute, it is a priority, then that's when it's time to shift things.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is so good. Such a great way of wording it, just saying it is a priority or it's not a priority, and just like setting up those boundaries of, like, I don't know, for us in like emergency medicine, I actually love how I was just telling my husband today, I was like, I'm so glad how when I leave work, like it doesn't come home with me in terms of like, I don't get phone calls at home. And I don't generally have to do charts at home because I just finish it at work. I'm like, I just rather stay there and get it done than have to come home and do it later. And I think like if we kind of set up boundaries that way too, as much as possible, not everyone has that luxury, but if you can set up boundaries that way where you're not bringing home so much of the work, I think that just mentally is so helpful.
I think you do. I think you definitely have to have a handoff process no matter what specialty you do in medicine. Like, for instance, mine is I get on my phone, I text my husband coming home. So that's like a visual cue for me, like, okay, I'm coming home. I need to take off the facade of Dr. Weisman, and I need to show
Mhm.
up as Errin. I need to show up as wife. I need to show up as mother. And this I have to let go. And then the other thing I started doing when I was in the office, it was my white coat. When I'm in the hospital, I would change out of my scrubs. And that like physical act of taking that off, I really got intentional about that, being like, okay. And even too, like, sometimes you have hard cases, like there's just something and you're like, I just need to get in the computer one more time and look at those labs, or I need to see how they did after they went upstairs, or I'm just going to call the lab about that result. Like, I have really purposefully started, like, if that thing is in my head, this is the time to take care of it, because when I go home, I cannot stew on it because I'm a stewer.
Mhm.
I churn patients, like, oh my God, I hope that baby's doing okay, that I saw at 3 o'clock. You know what I mean? And so what
Yeah.
I really impress upon the people that I work with too is like setting those rituals, setting what works well for you to transition from one role to the other, because you cannot be all things to all people at all times.
I so love that. I think that it's so good. I remember hearing this one podcast where the person they were interviewing, he actually worked with athletes, and they talked about becoming the alter ego, just like Clark Kent. You see him as a news reporter, and then you see him when he becomes Superman, and he's in a different outfit. He doesn't wear the glasses. His look is different. And once I heard that, I was like, you know what? That's totally what I do when I go to work. Because I usually don't wear my glasses at home, like I'm not right now, but I put on my glasses, I put on my coat, I put on my stethoscope around my neck, I'm wearing my scrubs.
And it is game time.
And I'm like, okay, now this is Dr. Archana, this is all like, yeah, game time business. Like I'm not the mommy, like I'll see kids and I can totally, have that activity. And, and they're crying or whatever, I have to do procedures on them. I can be like, okay, I'm the doctor. And then I totally do the reverse thing when I'm coming home, take off the coat, take off the glasses, take off the stethoscope. And then as soon as I get home, I change. But I also, another point, I change out of my scrubs. And that really kind of helps me transition back into, home life, being the mom, being the wife, bringing in that softer side of me again. And then, but also I actually wrote about this on the blog. It was just published yesterday about like my commute and how that transition time allows me to go from one role to the other, like as I'm driving into work to get like into, my focus on and be like, okay, this is what's going to happen. Cause sometimes when I hit the door there's like crazy stuff happening.
It's go time mom mode.
Yeah. And then,
absolutely.
Yeah, and then coming home, I can kind of chill out, listen to some music or listen to a good podcast or listen to an audiobook and just kind of like have that decompression time. Like I need that 30 minutes. Like my commute is 30 minutes and I actually need that. Like if I had a 5-minute commute, I would be like, wow, I'd be like a big ball of stress.
To go around the block a few times.
Yeah, I'd be a big ball of stress walking in. And I think it's such a good point of like, you need to like, because my kids don't need me to be their doctor. They need me to be their mom, right? So I need to get into the mom mode. And my husband doesn't need me to be a doctor, in doctor mode when I'm around him. He needs me to be his wife and Archana, And so I think that that's like a really good point. Like you got to kind of put those roles aside when you come back home.
And I also really encourage the other really, really important thing that I really emphasize to our physician colleagues is having trusting relationships for which we can unpackage our junk with. People who we can expose our wounds to help work through it. So more and more research is coming out and showing that these type of groups, Dr. Brene Brown, she works a lot with it. And I'm currently doing a lot with physician colleagues and these trust groups as far as being able to be like, hey, I had a really hard case. I need you to hear me. And I need you to fully hear me as both friend and colleague and help me through this. And because what we're finding that in isolation, when we don't have those relationships, those build up. For instance, I bet there's still a couple of those patients years later that you still think about or have nightmares about. We all have them. And those are the exact cases that we all need to process through and say, what about this is still lingering? Because as physicians and people's stories of their lives, we get to write some pretty important sentences, sometimes paragraphs, even pages that define their life. And the flip side is true with patients on ours. And so I think it's really important for sustainability of your medical practice, whatever that may be, is you have got to have, and what I mean trusting relationship, this is a relationship that is one in which you can bare your soul to and know that it's not going to get to the medical board, it's not going to get to administration, it's not going to go anywhere, and that most likely happens between colleagues, typically of the same sex too, so male to male, female to female. And so recently in my area here in Southern Indiana, I set up one of these groups for one of my local hospital systems. We call it Women in Medicine. We get together every other month, either doing a fun activity or in somebody's house. And we ask each other 2 questions, and you can do it in small groups, or we like to do ours in kind of, our group is about 10 to 15. It kind of fluxes who's there. But the 2 questions are, what is your greatest achievement since the last time we've met? And what has been the thing you've been struggling with? And it goes professional, it goes personal, but let me tell you, there's so much healing that happens that I really think every woman in medicine needs this. I really do. And I'm so passionate about it. I've started to organize online groups that meet via Zoom to do this for each other, for women like me who before I didn't have anybody in my area that I could do this with besides calling like my med school girlfriends. But doing it in a position with someone like a coach, or there's other people who can do it, who can really help the healing process, because when you take that weight off your shoulders and you show your wounds to others and they help you heal them, God, you're such a more powerful healer yourself.
Yeah, that's so great. I've not heard about that. I really appreciate you sharing that. That's such a phenomenal idea. And I think much, much, much needed, because, I mean, we kind of have that at my work in terms of like, one of my friends had a tough case, a doctor as well. And I, messaged her afterwards. And I was like, I heard you had this really awful case. How are you doing? Like, I'll just kind of like try to support. I wanted to be there for her and try to support her. And I was like, I can only imagine how difficult it was. But
Right.
I think like that's such a good idea of, making it like a monthly thing or every other month, whatever it may be. So it's just like a constant, like standing thing where because it's constant, the stuff constantly
Yes.
comes up.
Well, and also I think it's important. I mean, because we all have like our groups, like be it our community faith groups, or maybe it's a group of moms that get together, or, some kind of group that, because we're, as humans, we're just tribalistic. But I think what makes it go to such a deeper level is like, I know your path and you know my path. Even
Yeah.
though we didn't do residency together, we have been in the trenches together. And I think that's what makes it even more powerful, being female physicians only. And really, God, it's just, I love it. We had our Christmas party this last week, and we've been doing it almost a year now. And so we were talking about like what 2019 looks like, and all of that. And they were all like, no, we have to keep doing this. We're not stopping. And so that lets me know that it's been impactful. Now, I didn't do like a formal research with it. I've just gone off of my own gut feeling, and like I said, what Dr. Brene Brown's been doing, and that kind of work. But let me tell you guys, you need this somehow in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to chat with you offline about that more and setting up
Sure.
something, but I think that
Let's
would
do
be
it.
so great for our like women in white coats community,
I
because
do
I think
too.
like, yeah, we all need to like support each other, empower one another, and just like, have each other's back and be sounding boards for one another. But
And we do that some, like when you put comments up, but I think it's even better when you can like have that live discussion. So yeah, I would love to. We'll have to make it
absolutely.
hashtag life goals here for women in white coats.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Errin. This was so fantastic. And you guys all check out her podcast and her website. It's called rxs.com for Truth Prescriptions. And her podcast is Dr. Me First. So
Yeah,
definitely you guys check that out. Thank you so much, Errin, for being here. You were phenomenal. And this was such a great conversation. We're definitely going to have to continue to chat more about this, and so much more to say. But
yes.
thank you so much. This is great.
Sure, absolutely. And everybody out there, this is a great community, and just reach out. If you need help, do not stay isolated. Just reach out and get help.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Thanks, you guys, for watching. And we hope you will check back here for all the other great content we're putting up, blog articles. We have our conference coming up in April. Errin, I hope you'll come to it. It's going to be near Atlanta at Chateau Alon. It's going to be amazing. Women in Medicine Wellness Retreat. We're going to be talking about a lot of great stuff for us as women in medicine and how to really sustain ourselves and overcome a lot of these issues that come up. So and also advance our careers. And also a lot of fun stuff. We're going to have wine tastings, book signings, and award ceremonies. It's going to be a phenomenal event. I hope you guys will all come check back here on our page and our blog for more details. All right, Errin, thanks so much. I will talk to you soon.